This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon with you. It's the 19th season. It's the 20th episode. Not really the 20th episode, made a great many more than that. But the naming convention dictates that longer eps get an episode number, and this is the 20th of those. It's the top of the week. It's Monday morning, and I'm back in London, which means that, of course, I've been awake since about 4 o'clock working. I'm hot to trot. Jeff's in the wood cabin backdrop that we've grown used to across the journey. Hello to you.
Hello from the sauna. Yep, spooning some water over the hot rocks, whipping my shoulders with a branch of sage. Is it sage? What do they use? Birch? Maybe it's birch. I'm not sure what the sauna. All I remember is that ad where the Russian lady runs out into the snow and says it's very invigorating. Schweppes, was it Schweppes? It probably was.
I did one. I did one of the Schweppes ad. Scandinavian saunas when covering. Yeah, one of them too. During when I was covering Eurovision in 2016, I was doing a travel magazine travel piece as part of that, and did the Swedish sauna, kit out the whole bit, then jumping in the freezing cold lake, all part of life's existence and so on. But yes, it's not always nice when you are there, and I am here in our home turf, even if we are separated and don't get to sit next to you doing these for the next little while. We will find our groove pretty quickly, I am certain. We've got a lot to get into. We're on the cusp of the T20 World Cup, and by that I mean we've got squads. We've got a really strong news line too out of India, which, Jeff, you need to detail in some depth because it could derail the comp altogether, at least one team from it. There are still Ashes news lines, plenty of them after some outstanding reporting over the weekend. We'll talk about the Big Bash. And we will talk about some other bits and pieces from the T20 world as we round out our show, in addition to talking about Adelaide, which might sound a bit weird, but it'll make sense when we get there. Jeff, we've got some good news off the top, though. And, we're a bit late to this story because we haven't recorded a weekly in quite some time due to the way that the Sydney Test spliced in. But with Damien Martyn falling ill during the Melbourne Test match, and according to the update from Adam Gilchrist a few days ago, much better now.
Just such a relief. Induced coma is a terrifying term when you hear it. Meningitis is just a ruthless, brutal infection, and it hits people so quickly, and it did in this case. But the news coming through that Damien Martyn's out of that coma, Adam Gilchrist has been the link to media to get that news out from the family to the public. But the fact that he was able to come out of the coma, he's able to get back home, he's speaking again, it's a vast relief, given that, I mean, he's part of that generation of players that we've lost a couple of already, and it's way too soon to be losing players who are so close to the hearts of so many people who watch them play what feels like relatively recently, only the 06, 07 Ashes when Damien Martyn packed up his Test career. So it's not a long time ago, and just vastly a relief to hear that at least he's come through the worst of it, and hopefully he's able to go through with a strong recovery.
Yeah, absolutely, because that did sound pretty rough when it first came through. So great news there on Damien Martyn's recovery from meningitis. I don't know an awful lot about meningitis, but reading about it when he got crook, it can obviously be fatal. So pleased to see he's on the mend. That came through, as I said, during the Melbourne Test, and we learnt more during the Sydney Test. We're still sort of anchoring a lot of our conversations to Ashes timelines. How can you not, after such a massive series? I don't know how you've sort of felt at the back of it, Jeff. A lot of people, when dropping the kids this morning at school and nursery, wanted to talk about it and get my impressions. I'm like, I don't know. It was a really interesting series. There were lots of fascinating storylines running through it, but the fact that it was nowhere near as competitive as we all hoped in the lead up is the sort of through line of a lot of that English fans here. Like your everyday English fans are just gutted that they weren't able to do the business when it mattered most. And that's the catalyst for a whole bunch of reporting as well. Nick Holt, Will McPherson on Saturday, publishing the type of piece that you might expect the day after an election. I joked with you last week. I got one note wrong on that. It was the Hawke Ran review into the Labor Party was what I was reaching for. But this is more I don't know, like I remember Christine Jackman, when she used to work at the Australian, would often write these really detailed pieces the day after an election in the Monday paper. This felt like that where Nick and Will have had the chance to speak to a lot of people, gain a lot of information we didn't have before, and it tells a broader story here about how this England team, when preparing for the series, already had a lot going on behind the scenes. And it does feel like there are at least a couple of different camps now. Whether that's true or not, I suppose time will tell, but it doesn't feel like they're singing off the same hymn sheet at the moment as they all try and get their own versions of history on the public record.
Well, it was interesting that during the Sydney Test, friend of the show, Will McPherson, I don't think I exchanged a word with him during the Sydney Test because he was on the phone the whole time. He was just walking around in the back corner of the press box somewhere, talking to somebody, sotto voce, in the background during the entire Test match. So obviously they did a lot of legwork on that story. It was extremely detailed and extensive. And I mean, I think it's astonishing that the Harry Brook New Zealand story was able to be concealed for as long as it was and didn't come out until after the last test. I think it was incredibly ill-advised from England to let that happen as well, to be an administration that covers up a story like that instead of front-footing it. Like, yeah, it would have been bad. It would have been distracting for that to come out before the Ashes, but it's not like it helped Harry Brook. He had an appalling series in terms of his decision-making and in terms of trying to stamp him as a future leader, it had the opposite effect. You know, to put this in concert with the series he ended up having, where he was so frequently irresponsible on the field, and then you back it up with the fact that he's a terrible decision maker off the field too, apparently. Like, he's got a huge amount of ground to try to make up before he could even be considered. And, you know, the fact that he's still in a leadership role as a vice captain in that team says something about how poor, how chronically weak that England culture is at the moment, that nobody's accountable for anything.
I'm always kind of mindful of not wanting to come across as like a wowser or something with these things. Like, I think we said it on the last Daily Show, didn't we, Jeff, that, you know, who are we to judge? But it's just what, like, yeah, there are moments in time that speak volumes about the way an organisation is operating. And yeah, to come back to that political comparison, it's often the way in public life where like one thing will be the symbol of an entire administration. And it just seems like that sums it up. Maybe England got that right, because you think about it, it didn't come out till after the final ball was bowled. It felt like it was the sort of story that was, and I've not spoken to Halsey or Will about it, but the timing of it did feel like someone had made a point of getting it out there and getting that information out there at that exact juncture, maybe to destabilise, who's to know. Because the alternative would have been for them to have front-footed it. And it's easy for us to say that now. And you're right, it would have been a massive brouhaha. They probably wagered on, with so few people covering that New Zealand series, it was so off the radar that they would sneak through and it wouldn't get out. But there's always a risk that it will somewhere. It only takes one person to brief it out, and then you end up having a whole slew of headlines, and that's what's happened.
And if that had come out after the second test, if that had been after Brooks' poor shot in Brisbane, for instance, you know, then they would have done themselves a lot more damage. Like, I just think it's incredibly naive as a cricket board and as the people who are in charge of the media strategy and all the rest of it to say that you're going to sit on a story like that. It's beyond naive. Like, I can't believe that was the call they made.
The other story, and you know, we could go through every last detail of Will and Hultie's piece, but the truth is everyone's read it already. There's no point in you and I going through. It's all out there on social media. If you haven't read it yet, I'm sure we can supply it to you. The Simon Wilde piece yesterday, that they might have curfews on them now, the England team. Feels like a bit of a cycle with sporting teams about curfews, in the same way that you have that cycle around whether they're permitted to play football to warm up pre-game. You know, you have one administration that lets them play football, then someone gets injured, then they're not allowed to play football, then the players revolt and they can play football again, then someone gets injured and it starts once more. It feels the same thing with curfews, that these get implemented from time to time. They work periodically. Wasn't it in 99, Jeff, from memory, that Steve Waugh had a curfew on them and then they got the curfew lifted and they didn't lose another game and won the World Cup or something like that? I might be getting it out of whack there, but I've got some recollection from my childhood of this being a talking point in the Aussie dressing room. But yeah, the very fact that we're talking curfews and that booze is now such a defining part of the conversation, it'll piss them off no end. But unfortunately, when you play poorly, as they have in Australia, it's the trivial things like this that become drivers of the conversation, and I'm sure part of the review as well.
Well, it should piss you off, you know. It should be galling that this is where the conversation is. The conversation's here because they prepared badly, they played badly, and they absolutely dogged it in a series. And that level of disappointment that you're talking about from people you're talking to, and almost even most of the Australian supporters I've spoke to over the last few weeks, that word of like unfulfilled or unsatisfied or disappointed, those sort of words kept coming around, that we didn't get the spectacle that we were hoping for. If I don't think you need to be putting curfews on players. I think you just need to be saying to your players, don't be a fucking idiot. Like just please go out and make sensible decisions. Now, Harry Brook making bad decisions when faced with a bouncer is something that we've seen on the field plenty of times, but don't go to places where a bouncer's going to clock you, and don't put yourself in a situation where a bouncer's going to clock you. And it may not be your fault. Look, we've all met some pretty objectionable security staff in our time who, don't need much provocation to get into it with somebody, but you can't be letting that happen at all. You've got to be making better decisions than that. You don't need a curfew. You just need people who aren't going to act like morons. And unfortunately, enough of these England players have shown an inability to be able to control their behaviour in that way, and that's where you're ending up with problems. You need players who don't need a curfew. You don't need players to have a curfew put on them. Yeah, well, that bit in there where Stokes had told the dressing room after Adelaide, don't go out, it's Australia's night, we're not going to be only for players to have been seen out later than the Australians were on that night. Yeah, it all feeds feeds the machine, you could say, as did Alistair Cook's saying that he didn't want the job. But it sounded to me, Jeff, I don't know if you've seen the quotes as yet, but they sounded to me, or they read to me rather, because they were in a press release, that it was like the kind of thing you say when you actually are quite interested, you actually are quite keen. You don't want to say directly, maybe it's akin to, stick with my theme from 5 minutes ago, where someone's asked whether they want the leadership of a political party. Of course you say no, but the very fact that you're answering the question in the first place advances the chance that people will keep talking about it, and you eventually might end up in the job. So I don't know whether Cookie is actively trying to be there waiting for the crumbs off the pack if McCullum gets sacked, but I'd be surprised if he wasn't in line for at least an interview. He'd be someone they would speak to, but I mean, everybody will look at, say, Alistair Cook 2010-11 and say he is someone who went to Australia and succeeded, rather than look at Alistair Cook 2013-14, who was leading that team and had absolutely no ability to keep it together when that team fell to pieces in 13-14. So there can be a rose-tinted glasses thing when looking at what players have done in the past versus what they couldn't do in the past. I'm not sure if the style that he would bring would chime with the kind of group of players they've got now. It might be the sort of thing where they'd need to have a much more thorough clean out than they're probably going to have, because it seems like the way that England will go on here is they might make a couple of changes for the sort of the optics of doing it, but I don't think they're going to clean house and sack half the team. What the next coach will need to have, if McCullum does get moved on, they'll need to be bloody strong, because it feels like, and this is also in the reporting from Holty and Will, that Stokes has never been stronger, or rather that he's never had more authority. And if you're walking in and you're trying to kind of new broom it, if you like, you would need to have a fair bit about you. I still think that it should be an Australian former batter, specifically an Australian former batter, i.e. someone with the technical know-how of how difficult it is to perform in Australia and can provide that perspective. I'm not saying that everyone needs an Australian coach at all times, but it feels like this particular team could do well with that. I'd be interviewing Chris Rogers as soon as I could if I were them. I'd be just saying, look, he's been able to take that young Victorian team from a fair way back a few years ago into Shield finals, top of the table at the moment. If there's anything about batting that Chris Rogers doesn't know, I'm yet to hear of it. Did it in both countries forever. But, it might be hard to attract talent like Rogers. If you're the ECB and you're trying to get those people in to interview, they might go, well, I don't know about this dressing room. It's less about the volatility. It's not like Pakistan-style off-field volatility. It's more like, I don't know about this dressing room. Like, you could end up being part of the collateral damage yourself, and it might hurt your own career. See Matthew Mott, who won a World Cup with them and found himself out of his job a cycle on. So I know that the white ball and the red ball is different, but just a passing thought there that, someone like Rogers, it doesn't have to be Chris himself, but someone like him, they should be scouting them now and doing their homework so that they have the ability to get those people in front of them if the time comes that they decide that McCullum's not going to change. And those answers he gave on the SCG to Jonathan Agnew and to Nasser Hussain suggest that he's going to remain the way he is. So, it's going to be a fascinating review process, and it'll, probably play out over a number of months. The white ball and the red ball are not that different in terms of how they've gone to pieces in a relatively short space of time, though. So there is that. I would have thought if you're someone like, Rogers wouldn't be a sexy enough candidate for England at the moment. He's not a big enough name. They've had the foreign coach. They'll do it like the football team. You've got to follow up the foreign coach with the English coach. They'll want someone who's got name recognition and stability and credibility if they go forward, and things could still go off the rails. If you're Rodgers, the smart players sit back and wait and see if they stuff it up in 2027. And if they do, then that's when you come in and get yourself a 5-year tenure. You want to come in clean. Yeah. It's not clean at the moment. There's still refuse and ordure all over the dressing room floor right now.
Meanwhile, Australia, how good's their lives? Khawaja comes back and smashes 78 in the Big Bash. Easy peasy. Mitchell Starc drained a hole in one over the weekend. Mm-hmm. And then Travis Head's 30-metre putt in that Pro-Am. Was it a Pro-Am? Whatever it was when he went home the next day with Maxi. Like, how good's their life? It's a pretty nice time to be an Australian Test cricketer, even a former Test cricketer. All the baggage of a home Test series and knowing that if they don't win here, then, life's pretty tough, but now they can reset and rightly enjoy a little bit of downtime. A bunch of them are playing in the Big Bash, but not all of them. Travis Head's not playing in the Big Bash, fair enough. He can have a bit of space. They've got the T20 World Cup around the corner. A bunch of the 3 format players will be preparing for that. Maybe we should move to that, Jeff, because the Aussie squad has been announced since we last recorded. So for that, Mitchell Marsh, of course, captaining that side. Cummins, Hazelwood and Tim David are all in the 15, but they could tweak that if any of the 3 of them don't come up from their respective injuries. Matt Kuhneman's probably the big winner. He's not played in a World Cup before, but he'll be there along with Adam Zampa as the key spinners. Mitch Owen, a lot of time was invested in Mitch Owen since he won the Big Bash a year ago in spectacular circumstances. He found himself out of the squad. I suppose he probably needs to wait for Glenn Maxwell to retire, maybe, possibly. Is that the next cab off the rank in that sort of big hitting role? Sean Abbott's not in the squad, which is unusual. They've tended to like Sean Abbott in World Cup squads, but he could get in if Cummins or Hazelwood misses out. I did see Hazelwood running at Sydney, Jeff, in the middle. He looks like the thoroughbred that he's always been, so that Achilles injury is clearly on the improve. No Ryan Phillippe, no cruel intentions, which is sad. But Josh Ryan Phillippe will be hopefully in Australian colours again soon. Sadly, no Sam Harper, who we've been pushing for. Harper momentum continues after making 84 not out, batting in a bare head again the other night. It's like he's listening to the podcast. Apparently he and Maxi batted together in the game against the Renegades, both without helmets or hats on, which is just an amazing sight.
Perfect.
More of it, please. The Aussie squad looks like you probably would expect it to. A lot of the names they're younger of age, like the T20 sides tend to be, but looks pretty strong on paper. They're second in the world rankings-wise coming into this comp.
They've got the fast bowling options with Bartlett, who can get the ball to swing if that is a factor during that World Cup. Nathan Ellis, who they've liked to have around that team, and then Zampa and Kuhneman to do the double spin duties. Matt Short could bowl some spin. Maxwell could bowl some spin. So Short and Maxwell doing that big hitting all-rounder sort of thing. It's a team with a lot of experience in Asian conditions for the most part, and a fair bit of power if it works, the way that they've been hoping it will, with Marsh and Head going nuts up the top and then hoping just to continue that all the way through. But Tim David looms as a linchpin there if he comes back properly from that injury. Cooper Connolly in that squad, which is interesting, who can also bowl some spin but hasn't really been able to make a run lately. So, they probably settled on this squad a while back, but his last little patch in the Big Bash hasn't been so good. So, he's such an interesting project player, and they're obviously very, very big on him. But whether he's in the right spot to be able to take it on is going to be the question.
And Marcus Stoinis, love that he's still in squads, and he'll probably be in the team. I wouldn't know. Let's not pretend here. I do not know Australia's best 11. That's my job between now and when the tournament starts, to learn more about this Aussie team and all of the teams. And you know what? I should learn about it, and I should invest in it because, crude segue, we can announce that we are doing World Cup dailies. I think we might have already announced it, but we'll announce it again. We're going to do daily eps every day of the World Cup in Sri Lanka and India. We'll have Daniel Norcross is over there. Fidos Munda's over there. We'll be at our home bases, so we'll drop in from time to time. Our broader final word team will be involved. The ensemble cast. Matt Roller, who's been our T20 expert, he'll do some eps. Cameron Ponsonby, who's with England in Sri Lanka soon for their 6-game white ball series before the tournament. He'll be back in England, but he'll do some eps. We'll be busy. We'll be there covering every ball of the tournament in the usual final word way.
It's about getting an ensemble cast together. So Molly Ringwald will do a few eps. Judd Nelson will do some episodes. Emilio Estevez may drop in. Rob Lowe with the saxophone strapped to his back.
Rob Lowe, Wolf.
That's
no problem filming himself.
It's one of the not alone there. One of the great moments in cinema at the end of St. Elmo's Fire when he gets on the bus to New York City with his saxophone just strapped to his back. He's not carrying it in a case. He's like, no, I don't know when I may need a saxophone with very little notice, and I need to be able to, like an Old West gunslinger, pull it out of the holster and get jamming when I'm on this bus to New York City.
I'll just pivot to say quickly, if you want to work with us in the World Cup, just email me now. I haven't done any of this for a while. Adam@finalwordcricket.com. Of course, we'll have lots of different commercial opportunities being a World Cup. These things do big numbers. World Cup apps always do well. Email me, Adam@finalwordcricket.com. Get yourself in our show over in the subcontinent, which, Jeff, has been complicated yet further in the week, and you can explain why now. Please.
Yes. So we all know about India and Pakistan. We know that Pakistan won't go to India. We know that India won't go to Pakistan to play. So we know that about half the World Cup is going to be played in Sri Lanka, even though the host was largely supposed to be India, because all the Pakistan games will be there and so on and so forth. Last couple of weeks, particularly, things have come to a head with Bangladesh as well. If your geopolitics is not absolutely up to scratch, think top left corner, Pakistan-India border, top right corner, India-Bangladesh border, right? Depending where does Zinedine Zidane want to put his penalty during the shootout, he might, if he's not going to chip the keeper, he might go top right corner. And that's where you'll find the partition. So that area is broadly Bengal, but half of it's India and half of it's Bangladesh, right? And broadly, because Bangladesh used to be part of Pakistan way back when, before the 1970s, when it became its own country. So you've got the broadly Muslim area is Bangladesh, and the broadly Hindu area is West Bengal, which is a state of India. So there's commonality across the border in demographic terms, but less so in religious terms. And there's been tension going on between the Bangladeshi government, because they had a revolt, was only last year, I suppose, and overthrew the sitting prime minister who'd been in power for 20 odd years, who was in favour with the Indian government and had a pretty tight control of things in Bangladesh. She was overthrown. She fled to India. India have been sheltering her. Bangladesh have been wanting her back to put her on trial for a whole slate of alleged crimes. So there's all of this political back and forth.
They did, didn't they? She's been sentenced to death in exile in India. Tried in absentia, sentenced to hang. I mean, this is pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, and I broadly don't think anybody should be sentenced to death ever. So I've got some sympathy for not sending somebody back to that particular fate, but it's also an intervention on India's part. Presumably, the Indian government didn't want that change of power to happen in Bangladesh. So as these tensions have gone on, the Indian government's got to a point where it's obviously told the BCCI to tell Kolkata Knight Riders, one of the IPL teams, to sack Mustafizur, who's one of the Bangladesh players who they bought in the IPL auction, because he's a bloody good bowler and he's good at T20 cricket and he's played for a bunch of teams in the IPL. So very blatant government intervention to say Bangladeshi players are now persona non grata in the IPL in the same way the Pakistani players have been for a long, long time, which is a big, big move. You've got 12 test playing nations and now 1/6 of them have been written off effectively by the IPL. And it's not just the IPL, because they own a bunch of the other teams in a bunch of the other leagues. So that also means if you're Pakistani or Bangladeshi, you won't be allowed to play in the South African comp or the UAE comp or the 100, and soon enough the Big Bash, once those teams start getting bought out, right? Effectively, the whole T20 ecosystem will become closed to those players, because those countries currently have a bad relation with the Indian government at a governmental level. So it's a huge governmental overreach to be blocking these players out of the most lucrative way that most cricketers have to try to earn a living, which is on the T20 circuit. And because of this, the Bangladesh government are now saying that their team shouldn't go and play their matches, which are all scheduled in Kolkata. So Kolkata's in West Bengal, and so because there's that commonality between the two sides of Bengal, either side of the border, the ICC wanted Bangladesh to play their games in Kolkata because it's a Bengali city, and so that's where there's likely to be the most enthusiasm and support for Bangladesh games. The Bangladesh board are saying, well, if you've got this problem with a Bangladeshi player playing for Kolkata in the IPL, then how can it be safe for our team to travel there? Also, our journalists, also our supporters who want to travel from Bangladesh to watch these games, how can it be safe to have those games? And they've taken that to the ICC, and there's a fair bit of back and forth about who has actually said what, but broadly, it seems like the ICC initially are saying, well, too bad, you've got to come and play your games anyway. You'll forfeit the games if you don't play, but it'll also cost the ICC a bunch of money if those games don't go ahead, because broadcasters would have rights to be able to demand compensation for the matches that don't happen. So there's a lot of pressure on Bangladesh to come and play the games anyway. Bangladesh are feeling a sense of wounded national pride and they don't want to rock up and play. And you can very easily imagine that if the situation were flipped and the Indian board said, oh, we don't think it's safe to send our team to go and play some games in Dhaka, the ICC would not be telling them that they have to go ahead and play them anyway. We know this to be true. So I think it's a mask-off moment. Like, things are really tipping so much further towards the complete hegemony of the BJP as a political party running the BCCI running the ICC. And we all knew that this was the case anyway, but in terms of the complete dominance of India's governing party over the sport worldwide, this is what we're seeing now, where multiple countries are being blocked out. The country being run by the Taliban, that's fine, because the BCCI don't have a problem with that and the BJP don't have a problem with that. But Bangladesh now has to be on the outer along with Pakistan.
Well, here we go again. You've summed it up nicely at the end, very clearly from the reporting. It's exactly as you explain it in relation to who and how these decisions are being arrived at. It's naive to say that cricket and politics should be divorced. Anyone that says that sport and politics aren't intertwined anyway are having you on. But this is different. This is, as you said before, a political party who is the government, who runs the cricket board that's, overwhelmingly the most powerful, in turn making decisions on behalf of the federation, in effect, or at least influencing them in such a way that no other decision could have been made. There's no other way that this could have been resolved other than the way that you've explained there, owing to the realpolitik of these different actors. I don't know where this will end, but it's going to make for a pretty scrappy World Cup. And
well, Bangladesh could bail out. Like, it's still a live option.
Year.
That they just say, well, we're not going.
But they won't, because we saw what happened in the Champions Trophy last year when Pakistan tried to flex. They won't, because ultimately their own interest is to align to making sure they don't end up in breach of contract. This will be the third ICC tournament in a row that is compromised by internals. 3 in a row is not a coincidence. It's the norm. It's the standard. And as we've said countless times in the podcast, this isn't an exercise in trying to have a crack at India about what happened at the start of last year when it relates to Pakistan especially. It's not that. It's observing how unfortunate it is that the game is now subject to the decisions of effectively one political party. That is not healthy. No other sport could run like this, but yet we just accept it as normal. We shrug our shoulders and we don't provide tacit support for it or anything like it, but we have to accept it, because what choice is there? Right now, what choice is there? And that's the state of play heading into another World Cup.
There is really no way around it unless Bangladesh really decide to take this to the mat, which, I wouldn't 100% rule it out, because feelings are pretty high, but there'll be a lot of financial pressure brought to bear on them over the next little while to fall in line and go ahead and play, and they probably will fall into that. So that's the state of play off the field, and with that as the backdrop, we're all supposed to just chat away about the T20 World Cup as though it's a normal thing. India going into it as the holders, as the favourites, Surya Kumar Yadav leading that team, who's pretty punchy on the political front, as we saw during the last Asia Cup. Shubman Gill not in the squad, which was interesting. Big talking point. I think that's fine though, that they've decided he's a Test ODI player. good. Like you're going to get more longevity out of him that way, surely. Like I know he says he wants to play in the T20 team, but he doesn't have to.
Yeah, there's that. Bring back Kohli, I say. 93 yesterday in the first one-dayer at Baroda, with the first time they played a one-dayer there. I flicked it on Jeff when he was on like 90. I'm like, oh, how good's this? I want to watch a Kohli 100, which seemed to be the only talking point by that stage because they were hauling down the New Zealand score comfortably, 300 odd or whatever it was. He also passed 28,000 international runs, which means he's gone beyond Sangakkara on that measure, the second highest ever. Bring back Kohli. That's what I want. I don't really care about who else is in India's squad. If Kohli's not there, I'm not interested. England's got Jofra Archer in it. Harry Brook is captain. Stay out of the club before you're captain.
Send him to Ahmedabad. There'll be nowhere to go out. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, actually, are there any games at indoor? Remember, there's the daytime nightclub in indoor down the stairs there. There's an option for you, Harry, if you by chance get to play some indoor cricket. Some fun names in the England squad like Rayan Ahmed, Tom Banton. I'm really, really pleased to see Tom Banton back. Liam Dawson, who should have been in Australia, will be there in the World Cup. Jamie Overton, who probably would have been in Australia if he didn't retire from red ball cricket, he'll be about. Adil Rashid, who's as old as me, he's still there as the frontline spinner. Phil Salt's been dominating. Josh Tongue is going to play his first white ball games for England in a World Cup, which is lovely. Although I think he's playing in Sri Lanka in the bilateral series that precedes it, and Luke Wood as well, who's now a bit of a journeyman. Jamie Smith misses out. No Jordan Cox. Feel for him. He's been there and thereabouts for a time now. And then a reminder that there are 55 games, including the finals in this World Cup. It's a bloody busy tournament. Group A, India, Namibia, Netherlands, Pakistan, USA. Australia in Group B have got Ireland, Oman, Sri Lanka, Zimbabwe. Group C, the aforementioned Bangladesh with England, Italy, Nepal, and the West Indies. And Group D, Afghanistan, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, the UAE. 2 from each of those groups into the Super 8s, just like last time when we were in the USA. That's the World Cup. We'll tell you a lot more, though, when we do those daily shows. They're going to be fun. I'm quite bullish about 1 app per day. It's not our speciality historically, but we get right in the weeds when these tournaments are on.
That is true. And there's enough interest for the badgery side of what we're doing to take over when you've got, Italy taking on Nepal, things like that we haven't seen before. This is where the interest is going to really peak. Before we go to a break, I will mention Maurice Blackburn. They are the number 1 plaintiff law firm in the nation of Australia. And I'm not going to tell you a story from Maurice Blackburn's work today because we've told a bunch of those stories and we will tell more, but I'm going to tell you that over the next few weeks, we're going to be running a little competition for them, a little giveaway, and we'll be seeking some material from you. So I just want to prep the audience ahead of time to get your thinking caps warmed up. You don't need to put them on right yet. But put them next to the bed and get ready to start doing some thinking because we'll be coming to you for some input.
Yeah, and it has to do with comebacks that might get the creative juices flowing. Great comebacks. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's number 1 plaintiff law firm. So great to have them as our principal partner on the program throughout season 19, and it's been great to have them with the Ashes as well, where we've I don't know how many downloads we did in the end, Jeff, but I know it's in the millions. So a lot more where that came from. And if you want to join us for the T20 World Cup, a reminder, adam@finalwordcricket.com. And when we return from the break, we've got Emma John with us again, which is great. And then from there, we'll move on to the Big Bash.
This is the final word. It's episode 20, is it, of season 19? Who knows? We've made approximately 800 episodes since the start of this season in October, was it? When there was another World Cup. We had the Women's 50 over World Cup. We've got the men's T20 one coming up. We've got the women's T20 one after that. We'll have 3 World Cups in like 9 months. One to ponder for the ICC.
Lots of, I'd say we did good numbers. Never had more people listening to the program numbers through the Ashes. Thank you to everybody who said nice things to us at the end of the series. There were lots of comments on YouTube and on socials. It's impossible to get back to everyone, but a big warm embrace from me and from Jeff to you for reaching out, as they say these days, to say, thank you to us and to appreciate our work. It's always seen and we always are grateful for it.
Given that we have been talking about cricket so much, we might talk about something else a bit tangentially. So Emma John was here over the period of the Ashes, is still here, in fact, in Australia, touring around, going to some of the cricket and also doing a bunch of travel and so on. And we're going to catch up with her in a couple more days in person this week. But for now, we're going to dial the clock back. This is a conversation we had a little while ago with Emma. You would have heard her a few weeks ago, earlier in the summer, and now this is where we are catching up. Emma John, who's been perambulating all around different corners of Australia. You've been to a lot of places since we saw you last. But the point where we last caught up, you were about to head off to South Australia. It was after the Adelaide Test, and you were there for a little bit of that, but then you had a lot more exploring to do more broadly.
Yeah, amazingly, I kind of managed to miss the test that did go the distance. I managed to miss some of the cricket in order to go exploring, but that's fine. It was wonderful. I did a road trip of the Eyre Peninsula. It's kind of like off to the west of Adelaide. You can drive around there. You could drive all the way from Adelaide, but it would take you, a long way around the coast, and it would take hours and hours. So I did the 45-minute little hop across the water on a little plane to Port Lincoln so that I could maximise my time there. And the reason I'd gone, if you're interested, which I'm sure you are, is because I had heard if you wanted to go to one place and sort of see all of the Australian landscape in one place, you can do it on the Eyre Peninsula. So you have the beautiful white sandy beaches that you can swim in, and you can go and you can do some of the swimming with wildlife. I mean, I swam with sea lions and dolphins, not to boast, but it turns out the sea lions and dolphins did want to hang with me. They were my friends. You've got these kind of dramatic cliffscapes, which don't tell the Victorians I said this, but is as good as the Great Ocean Road.
It's good. We'll wear that. We can wear as good as. If you're going to say better, then we might have words. But as good as we can do.
So that was fantastic. But then as you go inland, you get bush, you get so you have to do the kind of careful driving because the kangaroos might hop out of the bush by the side of the road at any point. So don't drive at sunrise and sunset. That's what I was told. And then as well as the bush and all that kind of wonderful wildlife and mallee forest, you also then get the farmland, some of the sheep stations, but you don't have to go very far and you're at the Gawler Ranges, which is like the red interior. So essentially, you're getting the whole of Australia in one place.
I hope in Port Lincoln, when you flew in, there was a sculpture for Dean Lucan, who is famously known for Port Lincoln, having won the super heavyweight in the weightlifting at the 84 Olympic Games. And I was an Olympics badger, Emma. That is an iconic South Australian Olympic place.
Yes, I definitely knew that. I did love Port Lincoln. I actually went on an Indigenous tour in Port Lincoln. So it was really interesting because the places that I was seeing with Emma, who is a Bungala woman, the places that she's showing me were kind of like really kind of obviously famous colonial sites, right? Because Matthew Flinders first landed in the Investigator around Port Lincoln. And all of these bays around the Eyre Peninsula are all named after his own experiences. So they're all called things like Disaster Bay and Catastrophe Bay, and things were
Slight
on fire.
Headache
Bay.
Peninsula.
Yeah, exactly. But what was fascinating was that so she took me round to these places. She would just share the Indigenous story, the story of the Bungala people who met Flinders. And what's really interesting is South Australia was a place of, where there was great conflict between the Indigenous people and the people who came and settled. But it didn't start immediately. So she was telling me that this place where Flinders first landed, in Bungala language, it's called Sweetwater, Galanyala. And there was actually this 12 months or so, possibly more, where the Bungala and the white Europeans actually, got on and shared before the inevitable kind of happened. And the Europeans started trespassing and taking water that, and not sharing essentially, which ended up, with the conflicts that happened.
Yeah, there's never any shortage of things to learn arriving in a new place. You're doing this trip, Tourism Australia's working with you to do this trip and with us so that you can tell us about your trip. Are they pointing you where to go? Because you've travelled a lot in South Australia already over the years, a bunch of different times on your own. I know you've done trips to the interior a few times, Flinders Ranges and that kind of thing. Was this trip you saying, okay, I already know what I want to be doing? How's that work?
Yeah, so they did they were looking for new places for me to go. Yeah, like I say, I've done the Flinders Ranges twice. I love the Flinders Ranges. Oh my goodness, I love them so much. Done that a couple of times. Find the whole interior obviously fascinating. Places like Wilpena Pound, places where it's just, again, for somebody who comes from a very small island, it is extraordinary for me to stand on something like Wilpena Pound and look out and see nothing really kind of human building or architecture or whatever. Just absolutely landscape free to the horizon. That is completely unusual for a Brit to see, and it really gives you this kind of extraordinary new perspective on the earth, really. I think that's one of the reasons I was wanting to go to the Gawler Ranges. I mean, that's a place that's got kind of these fascinating rock formations all around it. It also has, by the way, did you know this, the second largest granite monolith after Uluru, called,
I did not.
Is it called Mount Woodener? Mount Woodener. It's actually, I mean, I haven't been to Uluru, I'm going to be honest, so I can't actually compare it by eye, but I imagine it's a lot smaller because I got up it very easily. I mean, it took me like 5 minutes.
I feel like to an extent we've buried the lead here because you're in Adelaide, one of the great cities of the world. And I know that may not have been the perception of Adelaide sort of 30 years ago, but I've been going there very consistently for the last 20 for cricket. It's my favourite week of the year. If we ever move back to Australia, Rach and I, if we left London and moved to Australia, there's a fairly decent chance we would relocate to Adelaide, for we love it so much. We got engaged there. I feel like I'm always within sort of striking distance of so much outstanding after-hours culture. It's the destination test match for people both from around Australia, but also for people who now want to do trips to Australia to watch Test cricket. They eyeball Adelaide and go, that's the one we want to come to.
Do you know what? I've met so many people who are talking about Adelaide in such a different way. They've said, oh, wow, Adelaide is so cool. Like, we didn't know. And I feel like every time I've been to it, I've loved it. But maybe, again, because maybe it's something that it felt quite familiar to me, like small city life that just really appealed to me, but also loads, like you say, culture. I've been to the Adelaide Fringe. It is astonishing. Second largest fringe festival in the world after Edinburgh. And as somebody who's covered Edinburgh for The Guardian multiple times, I can tell you I would much prefer to cover the Adelaide Fringe because firstly, all the venues are really close together, so you don't end up kind of like have to hiking up a hilly city. But secondly, the weather's much nicer and you're not having to do it all in the pouring rain.
When people go there now, they know they're going there for a proper experience. It's not just another city. It's like, we're going to Adelaide. You see that in the Aussie rules season as well, Emma. I know most of your travel to Australia is during the summer, but when the footy's on, there's gather round where all 18 AFL teams play in one round at Adelaide, where they spread out across, not just in Adelaide, there's some games that are played slightly outside in the Barossa, but broadly speaking, Adelaide is the epicentre of the AFL for 1 week per year. It's such a great city for major events. That bridge that joins the northern part of the CBD over to Adelaide Oval, where they were able to do that development at the same time as completing the horseshoe at Adelaide Oval. It was a godsend as far as that people traffic and the willingness for people to get to the Oval, which has been a bit like with the MCG, Jeff, the great meeting place of Adelaide has become Adelaide Oval. And it's got that history that underpins it too. But it's an example of redevelopment done extremely well, whilst maintaining the integrity of those features at Adelaide Oval with the hill and the scoreboard and the cathedral, which remain as important now as they did decades ago.
I can also tell you that it is the second city after London to be officially declared a national park city.
Oh, right. That makes sense with the way it's bridged or the way it's bordered with those parks,
I don't know if does it mean the parkland around the CBD? Does it mean national parks outside the city? I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that designation was handed down. We love to do in Australia a comparison, who is the Scott Pendlebury of the Chicago Bulls. I read a line that said that Kangaroo Island is the Galapagos of Australia. And the rationale is that a misnomer, Kangaroo Island is not just full of kangaroos. It has some kangaroos. It has some very specific kangaroos that I think that are only found there, but it also has basically everything else in terms of native wildlife. Did you get to Kangaroo Island?
I have been. I've done they've got this wonderful walking tour you can do, because there's a trail that goes all around the Flinders Chase National Park there. Great place for walking, because exactly like you say, it's kind of like a walking safari. I mean, I have this memory of walking through the bush there with a guide, and the bush was close bush, right? So your trail was quite narrow. And at one stage we just turned a little bend in the trail, and there was this enormous kangaroo in front of us. I mean, big kangaroo. And my guide said, "Okay, just stay still. We're just going to wait till he goes. We're not gonna get." And it was that realization of, we are this close to the wildlife that
they're big. They're big dudes.
They're big.
Like I'm 6'5", and I've met kangaroos that look me in the eye. There are some units out there.
And then you just sort of look up any time, there'd be koalas hanging in the trees. I think I probably did my whole Australia wildlife bingo while I was there, honestly, like kind of echidna, all the various incredible bird life you see. The one thing, and they are there, the platypuses. Platypi? How do we pluralize?
I don't know. I think people get mixed up with it because it'd be a Greek root word, wouldn't it? Not a Latin one. So you think you'd throw the eye on, but probably not. I think they are platypuses.
Well, they are there. I didn't see them, obviously, because the whole point is they're quite difficult to spot. Yeah. And I think you have to be there probably at a certain time of night. I don't know, whether you have to kind of stalk a platypus. Yep. But it's all there in one place. Don't stalk a platypus.
Sounds like the title of one of my children's kids' books. Don't stalk a platypus. And if it isn't, we should write one. You and I should write it together, Emma. Don't stalk a platypus. Emma, John, Adam Collins, together at last.
Yeah, exactly. We just have to write it in rhyme, I think. We have to come up with some good poetry.
Got the skills. Well, Jeff's got that club in the bag. So the three of us together would be an unstoppable force in children's publishing. Watch this space.
Yeah. What rhymes with platypus?
You know what? The other thing, I don't think have we mentioned the word wine yet in this episode? I don't think we have.
Oh, true.
What are we? 20 minutes out from town is where you get into you're in the guts of the McLaren.
There's one. I was staying at Barrett's house, and literally across the road is a huge vineyard. At the end of the road is another one. Yeah. They've got big cherry trees as well. Yeah. They just hand things to him because everyone likes him in that town. So they're like, have some wine, have some fresh cherries off our tree.
Well, this was the sadness that the one test we had to go 5 days was the one where we could have spent some time out in the Barossa, but not to be for those of us who work in the game. But McLaren Vale, Barossa, and in the hills where you were, Jeff, with Burra. Beautiful.
Yeah. My favourite, I was very lucky in that my favourite wine in the world is an Eden Valley Riesling. That is my favourite thing to drink. And Eden Valley is really close to the city. But then also Clare Valley also produces incredible Riesling, by the way, has just finished this. I've done it before on a bike. I've spent sort of 2 or 3 days just going around vineyards in the Clare Valley on a little bike. But they've just finished this walking trail, which I think is 100 kilometers long or something. But it's split into 6 sections, and you can just walk the whole way around. Obviously, great idea if you want to drink more wine, because you won't get. You won't stop weaving around on your bicycle.
Yes, some caution advised with how you move from one spot to another when you're on one of those tours. It sounds like you've had a great time. We're going to talk to you again very soon because you've had other adventures we need to catch up on as well. But for today, that'll do. Emma John, on the final word. Thank you.
Thank you.
She had some really, really good adventures that I'm particularly extra pleased about that we're going to talk about on the next segment. So I'm not going to tell you what they were, but this is something close to our hearts, Adam, that we'll catch up with her about soon.
Yes, and she was part of the Guardian's writing team on the series, and enjoyed her piece about cricket being a public asset in Australia and really feeling like that when she's in the country. I loved her work, and all of you guys did a great job. You and Barney and Ali Martin as well, who is out there every single day leading the charge for the Guardian newspaper. He does an absolutely outstanding job. So subscribers to that newspaper were well served by the team out in Australia, which included, of course, Emma.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, it's nice to feel like you're part of a team in that you and I have worked together for so long on so many tours, but we've got our own things going on as well. And often we're lone wolfing it, particularly Guardian writing. If I'm on an Australian tour, that's it. I'm the Australian rep and I'm the only person there. So to be able to sit down in a press box with 3 or 4 of us in a row and to be able to chat about the stories of the day and workshop things together and work out, okay, who's going to write what? What's the line? You take this, you take this. You trade ideas. Someone like Ali Martin, he's doing the match reports, he's writing the presses, but he's also throwing lines to me saying, you should, some of the good gags that end up in my piece come from him initially. And he's like, yeah, just have that. So I don't know. It's a really generous colleague and someone who I'm really pleased to be able to work with.
Brilliant. Jeff, the Big Bash. I promised we would talk about it. We will talk about it. Probably not as comprehensively as other programs will. If you want to hear a comprehensive Big Bash report, Adam White hosts a podcast. Listen to that.
Just knock on his door.
What I can tell you is
if you knocked on Whitey's front door and said, tell me about the Melbourne Renegades, I think he would do it. I think he'd be up for it.
Because I know it's a weird time of night. We should get Whitey to do some of the World Cup eps because goodness me, that man knows his T20. So anyway,
he'll be staying up.
Canes are on top.
There's no way he won't be watching it.
Yeah, I think so. I expect he'll be commentating some of it. So okay, consider it done. I'll get Whitey to host some World Cup eps for us. Hurricanes are leading. They're on 13. Scorchers and Stars are on 10. Sixers and Heat are on. Well, Sixers are on 9. Heat are on 8, and the Strikers, Renegades, and Thunder. Rounded out. Thunder have only won 1 game from their 8. I mentioned the Test players are kind of in the frame a little bit. Not Boland, he's having a breather, fair enough. Not Travis Head, he's having a breather, fair enough. And not Green because he's uncontracted, which I didn't realise. I suppose they wouldn't have expected Green being available for it anyway. So why invest in it? Because if Green's about, he's probably resting or preparing for the next thing.
Bowling
so
load restrictions or. Back in the tank.
But yeah, Uzi got that.
They're submerging him back in the tank of goop where they bred him in the first place.
Yeah, the test tube that he came out of, which I remember Norcross describing Stuart Broad as having been built in a test tube in 2009 on Test Match Chauffeur. And the same in many respects applies to Cameron Green. Uzi gets 78 from 48, coming back to the Heat, not out in a winning team. Good on you, Uzi. Love that stuff. Beating the Thunder. Sam Harper, mentioned before, 84 not out from 51 after his 100 the other week. To win the mace. I don't know if you've seen the mace yet, Jeff. To win the gigantic mace that Jackson Warren presented at the G the previous week. It was at the Docklands on the second of those Saturday night blockbusters. Steve Smith was 19 not out. Yeah. It's fucking huge. It's a huge lollipop. It's about 8 feet tall, and it's gonna end us all. This mace.
So basically it's a doof stick. You're like, Sam Harper could take the mace to Golden Plains and his friends will be able to find him at any time of day or night when he's down the front for cut copy at Golden Plains and he's got his shoe in the air. Everyone will know where he is.
Oh. God, if cut copy were playing, I'd be there.
They are.
Are they? They're at Golden Plains.
Yeah.
Oh. So good. That is so much fun. I remember seeing them when they just had a drum machine. You know what I mean? It was like 2 blokes in a drum machine. Early days cut copy, like 2004 or whatever it was. I had the original cut copy T-shirt, the Boombox T-shirt for so long. It was like I must have worn it 500 times. It was sweated through. Then last year when we were in Mallorca on holiday, I saw a lad wearing it with the sleeves cut off. I'm like, and he didn't speak any English or anything. He was just a lad who liked cut copy, who must have kept that shirt for 20 odd years as well. I admired that behaviour. Where am I? Steve Smith. Oh, yeah. Just on that big stick, I saw one of the greatest travesties in sport last night, Jeff. I was watching the Gladiators celebrity special for the Christmas ep, which was on Christmas night here, I suppose. I was watching it with the girls because, we love our Gladiators. And in the eliminator at the end, so the 2 women celebrities, I can't remember what, one of them was a podcaster, I think, and the other one was Nicola Adams, 2-time gold medalist superstar. Nicola Adams is dominating, right? And the other competitor had to be taken up on a set of fucking stairs because she couldn't do the rope climb. And then because at the end she had a bit more energy, she won on the travelator. It was a true travesty of sporting justice. I just needed a platform to say that, and I've got a podcast, so I will say that. Celebrity Gladiators this year, I'm not saying the fix was in, but steward's inquiry. They gave her a fucking ladder. Can't have a ladder with the eliminator. Anyway, where was I? Steve Smith made 19 not out last night before his game for the Sixers was rained out after 5 overs. He wouldn't have been best pleased with that.
Crucially, Adam, the refunds kick in at 6 overs. So reliable reports from those who went to the SCG that the cheers went up when they went off after 5. All right, we're getting our money back. How stiffed would you be to be done for 6 overs? You get 6 overs and you brought the whole family down. You bought 5 tickets. You watch 6 overs and they go, yeah, that'll do. That's not even a game. Like, to be a game, you've got to have 10 overs. Like, you've got to have 5 overs minimum aside. Surely the same has to apply for the refunds, that it's where the rain cuts off, where
I suppose I could say
it's a match.
Well, you've got one Steve Smith power play. That must have been their rationale when carving it up. Mitch Marsh did well in his power play. The Scorchies went huge to defeat I was going to call them the Redbacks. They're not called that. They're called the Strikers at Adelaide Oval. Just on Scorchies matters, I don't know if you've seen the clip of Ollie Peake scooping the 6 for the Gades to knock them off from the last ball. I saw some in-crowd footage, like some in-stadium footage. They really, really care in Perth about the Scorchies. Like this was like your team's lost after the siren levels of they felt it. I don't know whether crowds in other parts of the country feel it the way that they do in Perth. Good on them for it. Filling the furnace, as they don't know if they still call it the furnace. I know they used to with the Wacker. Anyway, but Ollie Peake, who is captaining the Aussie 19s, that tournament starts this week. Pretty sure it's this week.
It's already.
I know everyone's off to Namibia this week.
It's
just
soon.
So Peake's captain in the 19s, and whisper it. Ollie Peake will probably be playing for Australia in like 5 minutes. So watching him through the 19s World Cup will be of interest, and that is the worst Big Bash recap you are ever going to hear. Yep. There are 8 group games left, and then they play the finals in a formulation that hopefully is the old McIntyre Final 5. Although I can't say that with any certainty. They might have changed it since last time, and if they did, they'll play another finals format.
I believe that there are 4 finals, and it's not in a 2-2 kind of situation. There's a couple in a row, and then there's another one a couple of days later, and then there's the main one. I can tell you that. So that does round out the worst Big Bash Wrap. It was uninformed, it was uninspired, it was unintelligent. And that is what we can bring to our coverage of T20 cricket. So don't miss the T20 World Cup, where thankfully other people will be doing a lot of the shows, and it won't be us.
And, the thing is, I respect T20 cricket for what it is. And I made this comment on social media yesterday. Did you see Owen Morgan's bit from South Africa in the sponsor shirt and all that a couple of days ago, which was doing rounds on Sky, I think it was. He directly says that if not for T20 franchise cricket, the game would be dead. No, I don't know about that. We nearly had 1 million people at the Ashes, did we not? We would have had 1 million if not for the 2-day test at Melbourne, and if not for the 2-day test at Perth. I mean, it might feel sometimes like I was at Lords for Cricket Connects last year for the MCC Cricket Connects, and the BCG report, which is all about, maximising, exploiting every dollar. It all comes back to the T20 franchise land when this conversation is being had. But, is there any wood from the trees here? Is there not a little bit of 3 years ago, weren't NFTs going to take over the world? Isn't AI meant to be the defining part of our lives when the majority of AI slop is so undermined and lacking in respect? Do people care about the ILT20? The ILT20 was won by the Vipers over the last week, I believe. That's the team we get press releases from. So good on, Phil Oliver, who's the chief executive, lovely fella, used to run CricViz. Freddie Wild, friend of the show, he's hosted the Final Web before. He does the analytics for them. They've obviously done really well to win this tournament. But I saw some clips in a third full stadium in the desert. Does anyone... I know that it's a big achievement for those involved, but is it capturing hearts and minds? Of course it's not.
Yeah.
There is nuance to this debate. It's not a case of like T20 franchise cricket or bust, or T20 franchise cricket is keeping the game alive. I don't think that's the lived experience of most cricket fans. There's a variety of options. What is a bit distressing is that like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was like, well, we accept that T20 is a terrific vehicle to improve or increase the amount of people who are going to engage with the game. We're all on train with that. Yeah, we might be a bit old for generation 1, whatever, but we respect the place that it fits into, and really dynamic cricket along the way. But if we've changed the conversation to, if not T20 franchise, then what do we have as a sport? I think that's a bit... That's not the sport that I'm observing. That's not the game that I've been seeing in Australia over the last 5 weeks.
It's not realistic. And if T20 cricket weren't there, maybe some of the other cricket might have more attention, because there'd be more of a scarcity situation. I mean, the UAE tournament, it's on. Some people will watch it when they find it. That's fine, and that's good. If more people are watching more games and they wouldn't have been watching cricket otherwise, great, fine, good on you. But it's a bit like saying that, Married at First Sight saved television. You couldn't have The Sopranos if you didn't have Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. They're both part of the same ecosystem in a way, and some level of funding and payments and so on will be related in some way. But it's the kind of thing that you say if you're getting paid to be at that tournament and you're wearing the polo with the badge on it, and that's your gig for this week.
Jeff, as we round out our show today, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Final Word listener Amanda Brotchie, the late wife of a friend of the show and guest of the show, Adam Zwar. She passed away from cancer last week, and Adam published an incredibly moving tribute in The Age, which I assume was his eulogy from the funeral. Adam said to me later when I wrote to him just on social media saying what a moving piece of writing it was, is that they used to love listening to the Final Word together. She was a huge fan of the show, and they used to dance around listening to the theme music. And, these are obviously incredibly difficult topics to address when you're talking about someone who's been on the program before in Adam and his late wife. But I just wanted to read from the piece at the end here because it kind of sums up the person we're dealing with here in Adam and his late wife, Amanda. On her last night of being conscious, she said she was so happy and so grateful. And here we are, so grateful and so sad. Sweetheart, if there is an eternity, I will be looking for you throughout it. To find you and hold you again would mean everything to me. Goodbye, my beautiful girl. I just thought that was the most incredible passage in the most remarkable piece. And Adam, our deep sympathies to you from all the Final Word community. You're a great man, terrific writer, and clearly your Amanda was a remarkable person as well.
A lot of love to you from us, and an extraordinary thing to be allowed to be a little tiny bit of other people's lives. All you can think in these times is to find those memories, those moments that make you happy. So I'm glad that we were able to be there for a little bit for a couple of those moments, and I hope they keep coming back to you more and more over the years as you go on.
Right, Jeff, time for us to say goodbye. This has been the Final Word Season 19, Episode 20. We will be back in the feed midweek. I've got a couple of things brewing midweek, and then we'll have a story time to round it off. Thanks for the feedback on last week's pretty loose story time at the SCG. I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you haven't listened to it, I don't remember what we spoke about, but I know it was on the looser side. Maybe the week before was, I don't know. You know what? A lot of the story times are loose.
Yes.
A lot will be loose again in the future. We best leave it there. We thank Morris Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm, for their enduring support of the show. Jeff, have I got everything in? Are we done? Are we
listen to story time to find out if you've won the cases of Stomping Ground, the beer giveaway. That will be announced on story time.
And join
so that's
Patreon.
Why you've got to listen in.
And if you join Patreon, that's your ticket to get in the draw, your ticket to ride, if you like, to win a case of Stomping Ground, the Final Word beer and beyond. Okay, that's us done. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll catch you during the week. Bye-bye.
See ya.